tonight, our guest is one of the more interesting figures of New Jersey's election 2023. Again, by way of background here, since many of our listeners are over in Eastern PA or well beyond, thanks to the miracle that is the interwebs, New Jersey is a quirky state for more than one reason. One of those reasons is that we have odd year legislative elections. So the entire New Jersey Assembly and State Senate is on the ballot in 2023. And you may have heard our governor, as Rich Zeoli, our friend, calls him, King Philip the Unaccountable, has a little bit of a God complex. And we're going to get into this a little bit later on the program as well.
Remember, we are New Jersey.
Yeah, Phil, I'm talking, Phil. With all of the talk in the news ether at the moment about new waves of COVID and we need a new vaccine and this, that, and the other, there is a real risk that they're going to try to lock us down again in the not too distant future. Prepare yourself for that. It's coming. I don't know what form it's going to take, but it's clearly what they want to do. So having a check on Phil Murphy, not just because of what he's doing to our oceans, which we're going to talk to our guest about, not just because of what he's doing to our schools, which we're going to talk to our guest about, but also protecting against future deprivations of liberty, which are right around the corner if we're not on our guard, right? All of this is playing a central role in these upcoming New Jersey legislative elections. And Republicans have a chance to win in a number of districts in South Jersey and over at the Jersey Shore. Our guest tonight is running in one such district. His name is Steve Dnistrian. He is a first-time candidate for public office, which means he's a little bit crazy, but in all the right ways, because he's agreed to do this. He's a family man. He's got 3 children, right? So God knows he's got something else he could be doing on a Sunday night other than advocating for his principles and fighting to unseat Democrat incumbent Vin Gopal. He's got a long, storied career in the private sector. He's a businessman, very successful. Again, doesn't need this noise, right? But he has decided to run to represent New Jersey's 11th legislative district and to fight for the people of the Jersey Shore and beyond, all across the great Garden State. And he made the effort to come in here tonight to our studio, and we greatly appreciate him coming in to chat with us. So without further ado, Steve Dnistrian, welcome to the Matt Rooney Show in 1210 WPHT.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be with you tonight. Really good to be with you to talk about the issues and to say hello to everybody.
First time we've met in person, which is maybe perhaps a little bit surprising. I don't get around as much as I used to because of the whole young kids thing, which I know you know.
Oh, yeah.
How that goes. Mm-hmm. But almost everyone that I talk to in New Jersey politics about election 2023, they say, "Oh, have you met Steve? He's one to watch. Hey, have you met Steve running out in LD11? I know that race. They weren't sure it was going to be competitive, but I think that's one to watch on election night because it's going to surprise a lot of people." You're making waves and you're making an impression. Let's back up a little bit, though. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to get involved in legislative politics right now and to seek not just a Republican nomination, which you've secured, but also the opportunity to unseat Vin Gopal?
Yeah, so I am one of many neighbors and friends like across Monmouth County that I know who are, frankly, Matt, just sick and tired and disgusted of the policies that have been coming out of Trenton over the last several years. So, you really have 2 choices in that scenario, and one is to sit by the sidelines and continue to complain and hope that change will come, or you can step forward and jump in the game and try to be that change, right? Try to be the embodiment of that change. As you mentioned just before, first time ever running for public office, so it is quite different from what I know in the business world. I am the son of immigrants. My father came to the country from Ukraine on the heels of another war back a couple of generations ago. And my mother came from Ireland, and they were just seeking a better life. They met in New York City, became citizens, and achieved the American dream. And so we're grateful for that. And we grew up, Matt, like, many good people in the Philadelphia area, many people in the Jersey area, poor, not having much at all. But at the same time, we had everything we needed. We had good parents. They had determination and grit to work and want to create a better life. They weren't looking for handouts from anybody. They wanted to worship freely in their church, and they raised 3 sons, and here we are today. I went off to college and achieved things I never thought imaginable. So part of this is about really just giving back, as old and antiquated as and old-fashioned as that might sound. But unless unless we do, especially people who have no political experience, who's going to do it? How can we turn it around? This is the first step in a direction to try to drive some reason and some common sense into what's going on in so many of these policies. And God, we're in short supply of that coming out of Trenton for sure.
Well, your profile though is what the founders envisioned.
Yeah.
Right? They didn't intend to have men and women that were career politicians who just spent 20, 30,
Yeah.
in the case of Joe Biden, 50 years
Yeah.
seeking public office.
Yeah.
They wanted people that had actually accomplished something
Yeah.
and decided to eventually go ahead and give back, not because they needed the job
No.
or
Right.
the pension, but because they had the opportunity and the experience to share with their fellow citizens. Now, that's quite a contrast to Vin Gopal, who is a young guy. I think he's around my age, which not that young people can't contribute something to politics, but this is what Vin has done.
Yeah.
Vin is a politician, and he's behaved like one in Trenton. And we talk a lot, Steve, about politicians flip-flopping, saying one thing and then changing their mind and espousing another position. That happens in politics. Vin takes it to the next level.
Yeah.
It's next level, as the Gen Zers, like producer Dan would say. I think one of the clearest examples presents itself with this ongoing parental rights debate.
Yeah.
Vin was a leading proponent
Yes.
of Phil Murphy's efforts to sexualize New Jersey's school curricula,
Yeah.
not just for high schoolers and junior high kids, but very young children.
Yeah.
Then I guess they started to see the same polls that you and I have seen, that New Jerseyans are overwhelmingly opposed to this agenda. The most recent poll I saw said that 70% of New Jerseyans, and keep in mind, this is a state that voted for Joe Biden by double digits, 70% of New Jerseyans oppose these efforts by the Murphy administration to take that radical agenda and push it on very young children. So Vin has now decided, I guess, that, oops, maybe that's not something I want to be affiliated with, and he's talking out of the other side of his mouth. Are people falling for it?
Yeah, no, they're really not. What I hear at the doors is people are onto it. They really are. Let me just, if I could just take a step back again from a political rookie here and view this kind of situation we find ourselves in through the lens of a business person, right?
Right.
Business people are hired to be leaders and to lean into very significant problems facing their organizations, their companies or whatnot, whatever they're working for, right? New Jersey is number one in a couple of really awful categories, right? Number one, highest property taxes. Number one, worst business environment in the country compared to all other states. Number one, most bonded debt versus any other states. So when you look at the one-party rule right now with the governor and with Vin Gopal, which one of those issues have they leaned into during their time in leadership positions to try to drive some or any systemic change? None. Absolutely none. So,
And Vin's been there since 2018.
Yeah. Listen, and he's been there with a bunch of other people who've been there just who are not leaders, but they're politicians. Right. And politicians placate. Politicians are not there to serve the public. They're there to serve themselves. And you can just go through his voting record for demonstrations of that. So they have failed the leadership test, Matt, as we would say, whether that, I was with Johnson & Johnson or a big company in New York called Omnicom Group in the marketing communications field. When you find failing business units, you find failures of leadership. And so they've had their time. You've failed the leadership test. It's time to go, right? Now, back to the parents' rights issue. Why are we even talking about this as a political or as a campaign issue? I mean, it is really a sign of the times when you think about it that we have to talk about parents' rights as something that we need to stand up and fight for. When did that come off the rails? And this is, I got to tell you, this has been the biggest kind of learning experience for me, this particular issue. Right, because when you get into it, I was listening to friends of mine who are really, solid Republicans who were telling me all about this, and I had a hard time believing some of this stuff was true, but it is all unfortunately true.
And I think that's part of the problem with
Yeah.
this issue in terms of Republicans' ability to talk about it. You say to people, well, Phil Murphy doesn't want you to be able to be notified if your
Yeah.
6-year-old boy wants to use the girls' room. Phil Murphy wants to teach your 7-year-old daughter about her anatomy and the sexual aspects of her anatomy. They say, oh, you must be making stuff up. This is just
I know.
politics as usual. That can't be a real thing, but it is.
It is shocking. It is absolutely shocking. I've been
Yeah.
to Board of Education meetings where school boards are debating revising policies to allow parents to be notified. And I was asked first, I forget what reporter. I might have been up on News 12 up in New Jersey when I was asked, where do you stand on parental rights? I'm like,
Alex Sedan. That was a
Alex
good
Sedan.
interview. Yeah.
I am 110% parents' rights, and I'll never change that position. It's black and white.
Mhm.
Well, parents need to be involved with everything regarding their children, right? Every single thing. And when the state decided it needed to be in between parents and children, that was a bad day for the state of New Jersey. So that needs to change. And other things you can't believe, right? The governor and the attorney general suing 3 different school districts in Monmouth County to prevent parental notification. Another thing hard to believe. After the judge allowed an injunction in that case, as it's just gotten started, to stay in place, preventing parental notification for Marlborough, Middletown, and Manalapan. The attorney general describes the judge's decision as a quote unquote major victory for civil rights.
I mean,
Against parents?
right. And during the oral argument in this
Yeah.
case, for anybody that hasn't seen the coverage of it, a shameless plug over to SaveJersey.com.
Yeah.
One of the deputy attorney generals that was arguing was asked by the judge, okay, well, can't we all agree that in the case of a 5-year-old,
Right.
not 15,
Right.
not 12, 5-year-old, parents should be involved in these sorts of decisions and know what their child's getting up to at school. And the deputy attorney general answered, I think honestly, even though it's horrifying, no, under Phil Murphy's policy, parents do not have the right to be informed if
Yeah.
a 5-year-old is having a gender identity crisis.
These are the things I can't believe are actually being stated. Then you have the State Board of Education voting to advance policies on gender neutral things and taking pronouns out and allowing young girls or young boys to sit in sex ed classes with the opposite sex. And let's juxtapose this now against the Monmouth University poll that came out, which you were just reciting a couple minutes ago, that shows unequivocal support among parents for parental rights, for parental notification across all 3 parties, which, as a market research guy and somebody out of the marketing communications industry, just demonstrates how badly Phil Murphy and Vin Gopal and the rest of them are out of touch with the will of the people. I mean, they're just plainly out of touch.
And to your point, it's not even close. And one of the things I thought was interesting about this Monmouth poll and its discussion of parental rights and sexualized curriculum, there was not much of a difference between parents and non-parents.
Right.
I candidly expected, and producer Dan and I talk about this all the time, I think sometimes this is an issue which hits closer to home when you have kids in the school system. Nope, wasn't much of a difference. And while a majority, this is from the poll, 60% approve of teaching students in grades 9 through 12
Right.
about the range of ways people express their gender. Support dips below a majority for doing this in grades 6 to 8, only 42%, and drops to less than 1/4 for
Yeah.
grades 1 through 5. Only 22% of New Jerseyans thought that was appropriate. And this is allegedly a blue state.
Yeah. And you go back further, as I've learned kind of how the stage got set for things like this too. Vin Gopal was a co-sponsor of a bill that directed the Department of Education to advance sex ed curriculum for K through 2 children. I mean, that just set the stage, and he's chairman of the Senate Committee on Education, which
Right.
has broad discretion over the Department of Education. I mean, it all starts there, and it kind of just unfortunately blossoms because there's the what that we're talking about these policies, Matt, and then more interestingly for me is the who. So who in the bureaucracy over there is pushing this forward? Who are those people? And that's what we really have to find out because, again, out of touch with parents of all stripes, right? Of all kids. And listen, my wife, Cindy, has a special, as a master's degree in special education. If kids bring up serious issues like this in a school setting, they need to be surrounded by love and the best resources and the best therapists and their parents and their teachers to work through these things, right? So we come from a place of compassion for children on these things. And I got to tell you, there was a really interesting comment as you knock doors around the district. You just get these incredible insights. One woman who is a mom and very involved in her school board in Ocean Township said to me, you know what? We wouldn't need all these mental health services for kids if we weren't driving them crazy at early ages. And I just stopped and looked at her.
Well put.
And I'm like, that is so well said. Let kids be kids. Focus, especially with the little ones. Remember when kids went to school to focus on math and reading and writing and science. And the only thing that they were worried about, Matt, relative to the other sex was catching cooties or something like that.
Right.
Remember cooties?
I do remember cooties.
Yes.
Yes, it was one of the primary threats as a young male that you're worried about when
Correct.
you're like, 10 years old.
Yeah.
Cooties was a thing in my elementary school and middle
Yeah.
school. Yeah, so I had that growing up.
Well, Dan caught it and never recovered.
That's true. Yeah, I still have it. So
He
I don't
still
know what's-
has it.
Yeah, I don't know
It's
what's
a
going
chronic.
on.
It's a chronic condition. Science will get there eventually.
Yeah. You remember just how innocent that was with kids. And now look at what's being subjected on them, right? And why? So I think I know based on what I'm hearing at the doors and the constituent conversations, the left has swung way too far left for everyone. You've messed with our kids, and there is going to be pushback at the polls big time on this in November. That absolutely no doubt.
I don't think you're wrong. And another issue, which is perhaps an example of the Murphy administration and the hardcore left taking advantage of and exploiting vulnerable populations, the ongoing death of whales and dolphins at the
Yeah.
Jersey Shore.
Yeah.
You represent a district in Monmouth County, and we just had another whale wash up, a humpback,
Yeah.
up in New York.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was maybe 2 weeks ago we had one wash up in your district.
Yeah, we had one wash up on the beach in Long Branch.
Long
where
Branch.
Vin Gopal lives.
Yes. So literally on Vin Gopal's front door,
Yeah.
his front stoop. We've had dolphins wash up in Middletown,
Yeah.
about a mile from Phil Murphy's luxurious mansion.
Mhm.
So they can't run from this problem anymore. They continue to gaslight
Yeah.
and say, what are you possibly talking about? You're crazy. This obviously has nothing to do with exploring for offshore wind development, when the government's own documents, their own studies, acknowledge not just the possibility, but the probability that sonar is going to kill whales and dolphins. This is something else I know. I mean, you live at the Jersey Shore. I spent a lot of time down there. It like parental rights, it cuts across the ideological spectrum.
Yeah, people are heartbroken about this. They really are heartbroken to see these mammals washing up in unprecedented numbers along the Jersey Shore and along Long Island. And there's two key components to this, Matt. One is what's going on with our oceans, and then the other is cost about offshore wind. So let's tackle one first, right? Let's talk about what we know. Right, we have 26 dead whales having washed up on the shores between New York and New Jersey since December of 2022. I've lost the count on dolphins. I believe it's 40 plus since January of this year.
Sounds right.
Right?
We lost an entire pod in Sea Isle City a couple months ago.
Right. Now, and the other thing we know is that there has been active surveying of the continental shelf in preparation for drilling monopoles into them, right? And I've just been in touch with some really incredible people in the Middletown area and throughout the district who have been tracking hard numbers of survey ships going out, blasting sonar waves into the ocean, which has the potential to deafen whales and dolphins and really damage their ability to navigate, right? So the other side is very quick to say boat strikes, boat strikes, boat strikes. Well, if a dolphin or whale can't hear or detect these big boats coming, well, of course there's going to be more boat strikes, right? Look,
Absolutely.
I don't know what has caused this. I do know that we have two sets of data: A, the increasing dead mammals, and B, the increasing survey ships doing this. We call that correlative data, right? Which would give anybody who's got common sense reason enough to say, maybe we should pause and do some independent research. Maybe we should try to find out before we go further, and drill potentially more damage that way, right? So that's a big component right there that Gopal and Murphy have categorically dismissed, and say that there's absolutely no cause and effect. I'm saying I can't prove cause and effect. I'm standing for a moratorium and independent research. I'm not saying I'm against offshore wind or other forms of green energy. I'm saying we need to be open-minded about this. I'm a little bit more than the average bear when it comes to being briefed on this issue, Matt, because I've done consulting work in the energy sector. And so I am steeped in facts and figures about what's involved here. Two, I have a position that we should explore all forms of energy in terms of finding what fits best for going forward in the future. But the state here and Murphy and Gopal have done a real disservice to the people by dismissing any possible correlation here with the deaths of the mammal and not being truthful about what the cost is going to be for all of this for all New Jerseyans.
And this is another contrast between you and your opponent, Vin Gopal, because on the one hand, Vin voted against the recent bailout for Ørsted, one of the major foreign developers that wants to erect these giant pinwheels off of the coast of the state of New Jersey. But then at the same time, he gave a recent interview, and maybe we'll play the audio in the third hour tonight. He proceeded to call anyone that's suggesting, not even concluding, but suggesting that windmills might play a role in whale and dolphin deaths, conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
So he called the majority of his constituents tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theories.
There's organized coalitions of mayors and elected officials, Democrats, independents, and Republicans who live up and down the coast. So he's called all of them conspiracy theorists. He's called all reasonable people like me and others conspiracy theorists. And from this self-righteous, non-expert position that he happens to hold on this, which is just again, this is another bizarre thing. Here we have Republicans and independents, crying out to defend the animals, the manimals. Where's Greenpeace? Where's PETA? Where are the environmentalist groups? They've all gone silent on these things. And it's a real crime. It's a real crime.
Or they've spoken out in favor of the windmills, making these tortured arguments why we need to proceed without getting any additional information.
Yes, and just to give our listeners here tonight just a little dimension on the reference to the bailout, the state was due over $1 billion in tax credits for this offshore wind initiative that would have been passed on to the ratepayers, meaning everybody that pays an electric bill in the state of New Jersey, because that's who's going to be paying for all of this, Matt, when we come around to that. But instead, when Ørsted balked and said to Murphy, we may need to pull out unless we get these tax credits, rushed a piece of legislation through without any opportunity for public comment, $1 billion tax credit. Now, what does that tell you too? Right? They don't want to talk about cost. And the other dimension of this that has not been covered, and trust me, Matt, over the next couple of weeks, this issue is going to explode. The simple question is, who's paying for this? The answer is everybody that has an electric bill coming to their home in the state of New Jersey. Someday, should those windmills start spinning out there will be a new surcharge added to everybody's electric bill. Now, we don't know exactly what's going to be added because either they know and don't want to tell us, or they don't know. Either case is not good. But all that infrastructure will be paid on everybody's electric bill which I've heard estimates of $1,000 more per year per electric bill for the next 40 years. For the next 40 years.
Our friend Dr. Jonathan Lesser of the Manhattan Institute, we've had him on before, and it's thousands of dollars for your average ratepayer. And that's only one portion of the governor's green energy master plan.
Right.
Which, we were talking about this online, how they want to take away our gas stoves, implement all these very radical agenda items, which are going to, in the long run, maybe probably do nothing to actually prolong the life of the earth.
Yeah.
But it's going to make New Jersey even more expensive.
Oh, no doubt about
than it already is.
No doubt about it. But as Gopal talks, I voted against the $1 billion bailout. Well, your party passed it. Bottom line right there, right? And,
Steve, I'm going to stop you right there for a second. We're coming up on the end of the hour. Can I hold you over?
Sure.
To the next segment?
Absolutely.
Producer Dan, we're going to hold Steve over to the next segment, assuming that's okay with you. Dan's a real boss.
Dan, is it okay?
Yeah. I don't know how I let that happen, but that's how some marriages are, right? So we're talking to Steve Dnistrian, the Senate candidate in New Jersey's 11th legislative district. I am Matt Rooney. This is the Matt Rooney Show. Let's play some ads to make some money, but we'll be back with more in just a second.
Jack Smith going to Subway today is a message to Donald Trump. Donald Trump tries to intimidate people. That was Jack Smith with no words and a simple $5 sub in his hand saying, I'm here, I'm not going in.
So brave, he went to Subway, where all those MAGA people usually hang out to beat the crap out of people. Like Jack Smith is showing he's strong by going to lunch. And to double down, he went to dinner.
Rich Cioli, weekday afternoons 3 to 7. Talk Radio 1210, WPHT, and on the free Odyssey app.
Children who grow up in poverty are part of a destructive cycle. Childhood poverty creates adult poverty, creates childhood poverty, and on and on. At Child Fund International, we find this unacceptable. So we do all we can. In 25 countries, we are vigorously fighting poverty and improving the lives of over 11 million children and their families. Today's childhood poverty must not become tomorrow's. Learn more at childfund.org.
WPHT, WPHT HD, WOGL HD3 Philadelphia. From the Cherry Hill Volvo Studios, where relationships matter. Always live on the free Odyssey app.
On top of first-class care, you will never receive a bill. The only thing we had to worry about was just keeping Azalea comfortable. St. Jude saved her life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
Don't let woke win. Follow 1210 WPHT on the free Odyssey app. Download it now.
Matt Rooney back for our numero trace. Time flies when you're having fun, but we made it through 2 hours here on the Matt Rooney Show. Only 1 hour left to go. YouTube.com/@1210 WPHT, where I am speaking to Steve Dnistrian. He is the candidate for the Republicans in New Jersey's 11th legislative district. For those of you that are not up on your New Jersey geography, Monmouth County, towards the beach, Asbury Park, some of the iconic New Jersey beach resorts that we all know and love here in the greater Delaware Valley region and beyond, but where Phil Murphy is not only and his allies like Vin Gopal, who Steve's running against, they not only continue to make things more expensive, but now they've got these whales and dolphins washing up wholesale almost on a weekly basis. I know that's not why tourists are coming to New Jersey to see dead whales and dolphins. I think we can do better. And Steve's here tonight talking about how he wants to do better when he makes it to Trenton. And I think, it's not just something I'm saying because I'm one of those guys, if I don't have something nice to say, I'm not going to say it at all. I'm just going to be quiet and polite about it. Dan, he's kind of rude. He doesn't have a filter.
Nope.
Yeah, so he would say afterwards, why did we have this guy on? It's clear you know your stuff. You're on top of it. You're great at explaining the issues that you're discussing, which I think Republicans often do very poorly. And so I get why a lot of folks think that, you could be on the verge of upsetting Vin Gopal, who it's my understanding from talking to people out there in LD11 that Vin is not only flip-flopping on offshore windmills, he's flip-flopping on parental rights. He's also claiming that he's cutting property taxes.
Yeah.
I must have missed the property tax cut as a New Jersey taxpayer.
Yeah,
I didn't get my money.
I've missed it too. That's one of the hardest things I have getting my head around is just how normalized lying is in politics, and lying is coming from his camp in particular.
Well, you come from a world where you have to report to shareholders.
Yeah.
And other stakeholders in your company. There's actually criminal consequences for lying.
Well, you find a way to tell the truth, because in the business world, when you're in service to other people, when you're in leadership positions, if you are leading properly and taking care of those who work for you, you're taking care of your customers, you're taking care of the communities in which you operate your businesses, profits flow, right? So truth is a pretty powerful element of that at all times. But there's something just popped up in the district. We had a couple people reach out and send screenshots to us of a mailer that they received that said, Senator Vin Gopal has cut property taxes for senior citizens in half, which is just lying to senior citizens. First of all, it should be it's just worse than any other form of lying. And the assumption that senior citizens are dumb enough to believe that, it will backfire on him, as all these types of things do. It's just so egregious, right, to do that to people who are elderly, people who are looking for help financially, and you roll out these lies and you pin it to a program that might start in 2 or 3 years or whatever cockamamie excuse you have. And then another thing he's doing, Matt, too, is he rolls out these community newspapers, these small little tabloid things, which are just chock full of spin Gopal headlines, as we call them. And the last issue that came out claimed all sorts of restoration of funds that he pushed for school aid. And that's just not true, right? The numbers don't lie even when the politicians do. And so we know that in some of the largest school districts in LD11, including Asbury Park, Freehold Regional, Neptune Township, Ocean Township, and Eatontown, among others, $70+ million has been cut out of our district because of Phil Murphy's school funding formula, which inexplicably the incumbent senator voted in favor of. So he voted in favor of legislation that has cut funding $70+ million out of our district and sent it to other parts of the state.
Which is one of the reasons traditionally why New Jersey property taxes are the worst in the nation, because there's no accountability.
Yeah.
Because you're voting over here in your district, Trenton's taking your money, sending it somewhere else, where that money's going. I don't have a vote over there as to how that's being spent, whether it's being spent well, whether the kids are actually getting an education.
Yeah. So let me connect that dot. So when you take that much money out of the school districts and our school districts have had to do this. They've had to cut teachers, cut resources, expand classroom sizes. And then when they can't cut any more, Matt, they have to raise the school budget, which of course raises your property taxes. So there's the connection right there, right? And it all ties back to just this other thing, and again, from somebody coming from the outside, when you look at the numbers, just the spending going on out of Trenton over the last several years, the state budget from 2018 has gone from $34 billion to the 2024 $54 billion in 7 or 8 years' time. And before this budget was finalized, the Democrats shamelessly went behind closed doors, padded in $1.27 billion. That's $1,270 million in legislative grants that they could hand out to, by way of their legislators to help them get reelected. It's just shameless. And
we're paying for a French art museum in Jersey City.
Yeah, it goes on. And
very
on.
Important at a time when children have learning loss from COVID.
Yes. And Vin shamelessly will seek out publicity and send out mailers saying, oh, I've gotten money restored to the school system, when I, in fact, voted to take all this money out of the school system.
Right.
Now, I will say, as a working dad and commuting back and forth to New York City or New Brunswick, I wasn't paying any attention to this because I was too busy trying to take care of my family and pay my property taxes. Now, within just a couple of months of being able to focus on it, it is as bad as people think, right? It is as ugly.
It's worse.
It's really, it's horrendous. And but I do believe that we can change it. We can turn that around. And that has to begin with a change in mindset, which is a change in leadership, right?
So how do we do that? I want to drill down on that as we come down the home stretch here, because you know as well as I do, because we both follow politics. You're a new candidate this year, but you've been watching for a while. I think this is one of the reasons Republicans lose in New Jersey, because people have lost faith that New Jersey can be affordable.
Yeah.
Time in, time out, politicians come around and say, we're going to cut your taxes. We're going to make your life more affordable. We're going to improve the cost of living in the Garden State. Politicians like Vin Gopal shamelessly lie to them, and folks eventually get the joke. But instead of penalizing a candidate like Vin Gopal by voting him out of office, people have to do what's best for them, their families, or the businesses, and oftentimes they vote with their feet, right? And they get out of Dodge. So, you are someone, I said it a moment ago, who has the ability to explain this stuff. What can your party do in 2024, January 2024, if you're elected, to actually begin moving things back in the right direction?
Yeah, well, first of all, you have to take the majority, right, to be able to move the ball down the field, right?
Yep.
Minimally in the Senate, maybe, who knows, in both houses, right? And both chambers. And then you start to agree on an agenda that is outcomes focused, right? What are we here to do long term to drive systemic change toward our most intractable problems, right? So we've got the issue of property taxes. Let's lean into it and start to talk about and involve the people of the state in tough choices that need to be made, which of course means less government, right? You've got to be able to cut expenses to be able to drive down the tax levy and do that step by step. But it begins with inviting people into that discussion, boiling it down to basic terms, Matt, and then moving that forward. We can fix the crime problem that's been touching every corner of Monmouth County. You can't let nonviolent repeat offenders out faster than before the police report is finished, so they can steal more cars and break into more homes. There was an attempted auto theft on Phil Murphy's own block about a year ago. Oh yeah, well there was a car that got stolen last night in Rumson, not too far where he is from. And listen, I grew up in a very tough neighborhood up in Jersey City. I get it, what these kids need to do, right? They're incentivized to put money in their pocket, and if that means breaking the law, they do, especially if they know they're going to be out in 24 hours.
Yes.
Right? So shame on the fools that think that down in Trenton that think the road to redemption sometimes has to include punishment. It really does. And I say that again from a point of compassion. I worked in the field of drug treatment early in my career, and I understand what it takes for people to get back. So we can fix the crime problem by being supportive of our law enforcement officers. I mean, for God's sakes, we can't find enough cops. We can't find enough state troopers. Why? Because our elected officials have turned their backs on them, right?
That's right. It's
perfectly understandable, and it's shameful what's happening here. And then on parents' rights, no brainer. Just press reset, drive some common sense in there, bring parents into the conversation. You saw the poll numbers from Monmouth University. I saw them. If your listeners didn't see it, look it up. It's a resounding
I'll retweet it at
support.
the end of the show.
Yeah, please. And
I was surprised. I'll be honest with you. I knew that a majority of our fellow New Jerseyans thought this stuff was nuts because, like you, I live in the real world. I'm having barbecues. I'm not hanging out with Trenton people. I'm hearing people say, "Oh my God, can you believe what I just read?" But 77%. It's
no. Listen, my dad was in the labor union. My mom was a waitress for 41 years, Matt. I can walk into Asbury Park or Neptune Township or Coltec and have conversations with people across the spectrum. Everybody. And, there's a data point, too, in the poll about people of color in full support for school mandates as well. Of course they are. Don't mess with my kids. And we're going to see this theme And I felt it at the doors, Matt, before the poll came up. And you're at that door and you just listen to people where they're coming. You listen to what they say and you listen to what they mean in between the lines. And I kept coming back to our team to say, guys, this is with us and we're going to push hard for it and fight for parents because nobody else is. I mean, if we lose that, we're going to lose so much and we're not going to allow that to happen. We just won't.
Well, I think you know now, if you didn't know before, why Vin Gopal feels the need to lie and lie with a lot of volume before Labor Day.
Yeah.
He's scared, and he's scared of this man and not only his ability to articulate the conservative common sense positions on these issues, but also what he represents, which is a lot of ticked off normal people that are tired of the status quo. We want to be in charge of our money. We want to be in charge of our kids. We do not want the Jersey Shore befouled by foreign corporations that aren't accountable to you and I. I guess Phil Murphy's buddies with these people, but we don't get anything out of it. It's time for a change, and here's hoping that, Steve, you can lead that charge.
Well, listen, I'll just say loud and clear right to Vin and his team, I welcome the opportunity to debate with you publicly. I do genuinely come from a place of curiosity, wanting to understand why you would vote for a piece of legislation that has cut so much money out of our schools, why you continue to stick in the position of not backing law enforcement in this soft on crime stuff, and just refusing to even open up your mind for consideration on reasonable measures like a moratorium on offshore wind and answering the question about how much this is going to cost us, because that is the question. I can't believe we're this far along with this offshore wind initiative that we haven't gotten an honest answer from the state about who's paying for this and how much. So let's debate. They can see you. They can see me. They can get to understand who we are as people, our backgrounds. It's in service to the voters in full transparency. I've lived a pretty good, basic, boring life. I've got nothing at all to hide, even though you're about to paint me as I get the sense with these horrendous strokes of lies. But I've been warned about that. I came from a tough neighborhood, and so bring it. But let's be face-to-face and do it in service to voters.
We'd offer to do the debate, but Dan and I have like a 50% track record with that, right, Dan? And not everyone wants to come in here and answer my questions. I don't know. I think I'm friendly enough.
Yeah.
But, we would do that. Vin would probably be crazy to come in here, but if he wanted to have the debate here on 1210, we could even bring in a liberal.
Yeah.
I have plenty of liberal friends. They
Same
don't
here.
admit to it, but I do.
Same here.
They can come in and they can pitch him a couple softballs. He still might have trouble with them. We've been talking to Steve Dnistrian tonight, the LD11 state Senate candidate. Steve, where can folks find you online if they've been inspired by what you've had to say?
Well, I appreciate the time, and everybody at home, I appreciate you listening. It's been a journey. I'm on the web at www.steve4nj.com. Real simple. I didn't attempt to put Dnistrian in there because that would throw everybody off, but Steve4nj.com.
And it's S. Dnistrian is your, I keep saying Twitter,
yes,
your X handle.
Yes. SDNISTRIAN. And then you'll find, on the website, you'll find all the social handles as well.
And you're running with Marilyn Paperno and Kim
Ulner, who are great, who are just great. Working moms, they unseated 2 Democrats last time out after being outspent 4 or 5 to 1. And they just worked hard like we're working hard right now.
Yeah, and I think good things are going to come from it. Steve, thank you for being here. Thank you for coming into the studio. And definitely check in with us again as we get a little closer to Election Day, because I think that you're going to have a wind at your back now. Not from the turbines, but from all those angry parents and taxpayers out there. And we want to be there for it.
Yeah, appreciate that, Matt, very much. Thanks.